movies have always had a relationship with technology. The length of time I've been involved, it's always been a relationship with computers.
I think we're going to see a renaissance in indie filmmaking. There are going to be more productions, but with fewer people.
You know, there's never been a greater time to be able to go and tell the stories.
But I really wanted to use this opportunity. I had played around with some of the AI generative image models. I wanted to play around and see what they could be used for to help me create a film with no money.
The amazing things right now, is that anyone can actually use these tools,
right. They're for everybody.
And be able to create something and to learn right now.
I use GPTs all the time for writing, and don't let it write for me, but it's a helper.
Know what you're trying to make. Run into the problem you're trying to solve in making it, and then look for the right tools to use to do that.
I mean, I still feel like we're at year zero. Like we haven't really moved into what it could do yet.
You know, the sooner you start making your,
Yeah.
putting in your 10,000 hours to that, the sooner you will get to the point where you have that intuition.
First of all, huge thank you. And we are going to start. I'm going to introduce each of our panelists here. First of all, starting at the end here, we have Jason Zada. Jason Zada is an Emmy-winning director and creative pioneer in interactive storytelling. For over 25 years, his work from Elf Yourself to groundbreaking Take This Lollipop have pushed the boundaries of tech and emotion, reaching billions. In 2023, he launched Secret Level, a studio behind cutting-edge AI-powered experiences for top brands, artists, and agencies, from Coca-Cola's Holiday. Oh yeah, that was the holidays are coming. That one. From that advert to the Wu-Tang Clan's Mandingo, Secret Level's work has made it one of the most talked-about studios in the space. Zada's projects have earned Emmy, multiple Cannes Lions, and Webby Awards. That's pretty good going. Everybody else, Jason Zada. Not bad. Pretty good. Pretty good. Next up, we have Larry Cutler. How do you do, sir? Larry Cutler is the Chief Technical Officer and co-founder of, I've already forgot,
Baobab Studios.
Baobab Studios, the 10-time award-winning and 3-time Annie-winning independent interactive animation studio. For over 20 years in the area of AI, real-time technology, metaverse animation creation and development, also serving on the digital imaging technology subcommittee for the Oscars Technical Achievement Awards. Larry spent over a decade at DreamWorks Animation, where he served as a global head of character technology, I've got to move pages, working on films such as Shrek 2, Shrek the Third, How to Train Your Dragon, one of my favorites, and Megamind. But Larry began his career at Pixar Animation Studios as technical director of films such as Monsters, Inc., Toy Story 2, and Bugs Life. Everybody, Larry Cutler. My goodness, we could have almost filled the 45 minutes just with that. There we go. Next up, brief. I know, right? And that was me editing. Next up, we have Barbara Ford Grant. Barbara Ford Grant is a creative technology executive and filmmaker, bridging artistic storytelling with technical innovation in entertainment. Starting as an artist before becoming a technology leader, Barbara has developed groundbreaking production technologies for major franchises, including little mom and pop shop called Marvel, Game of Thrones, Shrek, with studios like HBO, Digital Domain, and DreamWorks Animation. Another DreamWorks alumni there. Barbara led the development of Academy Award-winning technologies such as the Arnold renderer, Katana lighting tool, and advanced facial capture and animation systems, currently working with Paramount and recently serving as president of NEP Virtual Studios and CTO of Meow. Barbara continues to push the boundaries of cinematic production and emerging technologies while serving on advisory boards for SohoNet, Visual Effects Society, VFX Voice and Magazine, and the Academy of Motion Picture Arts and Sciences, whilst also chairing the Scientific and Technical Awards Committee for 7 years. Have I got it all? Ladies and gentlemen, Barbara Ford Grant. And I edited, like I said, and I edited. All three of you, thank you so much for being here. We really do appreciate it. Now, the name of this panel, we got into it and we spoke about it, and we looked at scenes from a revolution, AI and the future of filmmaking. But I want to kind of take the scary bit out of that, and we all know the two letters that are the scary bit. We're all aware of it. And instead, we're going to make it new tools. It's new tools and the future of filmmaking, or while I'm sitting up here with these very, very smart people, we're going to call it, explain it to me like I'm an idiot. Because that's probably what's going to happen here. So first of all, I would love to get into what we saw up there, the fantastic movies there. And first of all, Barbara, we saw your work there with Unhoused.
Yeah, so it was the teaser at the head for it's a 22-minute film. It was done almost a year and a half ago now.
Right.
And then some of the ways that the team used AI in different shots, and it wasn't exhaustive. But as I watched it, and then I watched Jason's beautiful work right after, I realized just how much the quality and control has changed in that year and a half, right? Because the models that I had access to at the time we were doing that production just didn't produce resolution, or there were a lot of artifact challenges at the time, but
right. And let's just actually clarify for the sort of vocabulary of it. When we talk about models, let's really drill down. Like I said, like I'm an idiot.
All right, so I'm going to back it up a little. Unhoused, I left. I think it was Marvel. I had some time on my hands during the strikes. And so I used that time to write and direct a short film. I had done short films before, but I really wanted to use this opportunity. I had played around with some of the AI generative image models, and I wanted to play around and see what they could be used for to help me create a film with no money, with very little budget. I self-financed it. I knew I wanted real actors, I wanted real situations, and I was going to shoot it, but I was just looking at these tools to kind of see where they were, and it's not something that's easy to do when you're inside of a big studio, as probably a lot of you know. There's a lot of control for good reasons, but since I was independent, I could kind of work willy-nilly and just look at what was out there and what it might give me, and that was 2 years ago. And it started out in concept phase, and I was using, like you said, models, but they were really kind of what most people know as generative image, generative video models. They were these tools that you would prompt in, you'd get a result, you could give limited direction on it, and you got different things out, and it was kind of sort of a slot machine.
And we're talking about prompts as in, show me a horse, on Saturn.
In my case, it was show me a lamb, but with a little more detail.
Show me a lamb, right.
There are a lot of sheep in Unhoused.
It does seem to be.
The main character's happy place is hallucinating sheep in Los Angeles. And interesting enough, when I started, and I think it was like Dolly, which was one of the first generative image tools, it wasn't a great, the sheep were not great. But harder was getting from that sheep to something that could be animated. And in fact, it was like a year later where I was taking some of the concept art I had done, and suddenly there were generative video tools where I could sort of prompt and direct my way into animating those animals in a way that traditionally, both of us coming from traditional animation, the building of those models, the rigging, the animating, I wouldn't have been able to do it.
So we've got a fantastic cross section of perspectives here, and it's good that you're kind of ordered this way as well, because obviously we're going from kind of the way that you were using it in Unhoused, using AI models there. We unfortunately didn't get to see your video, Larry, because you didn't get your homework in on time, mate.
Apologies for that.
Yeah, so you should apologize, and I'm not gonna put up with the dog ate my homework.
It would have
We
been
plenty of time.
beautiful.
It would. I've seen it. It's great. So go over to the website there and take a look. But then we sort of go through the gamut, and then we're looking obviously at Jason's work there, was full generative. Am I right in saying? And that's from A to Z is.
Yeah, even more so, it was text to video. So everything on screen just comes from a text prompt.
And we're talking all the way from not just what we see. We're talking the audio as well. The voiceover was generative.
The audio was me doing the performance.
Okay.
And then used 11 Labs to then put a voice on top of my voice. So It's my performance, but an AI voice.
Right. So you then suddenly hear your words coming out of it in a different voice. How about the actual kind of writing process as well? Was there anything that you kind of used within that, or did you started with a story?
Yeah, I've jumped in pretty hard with AI. So as a writer, as a traditional writer and traditional director, I use GPTs all the time for writing, and don't let it write for me, but it's a helper. It's a creative, resource helper. I could run. Oh, give me a backstory for this person. Oh, I don't like that. Let me change this. Let me change that. But using it as as a creative partner in the process is usually how I use it.
Okay, and I think that's what we're hearing more now. Is everybody who I've at least spoken to, who has used AI successfully, is doing it exactly as that, as a collaboration tool. And we talk about new tools rather than just cool, go and do this. I do wish it did my laundry, but it doesn't, and it doesn't seem like it's going to anytime soon. So, but here we are. So, talk to us a little bit about the fiance piece there, because obviously there's also not just obviously how magnificent it is, the fact that everything in there is fully generative, but you're also dealing across doing real life renderings of humans and also character creation as well. So much more in kind of Larry and Barbara's world.
Yeah, it's all synthetic humans basically, and that was like done over a weekend. It's just like, hey, I have this crazy idea. Let me put this out and let me see how it's received. Let's see if this is something that's viable, that we want to invest in, that we want to make further. But yeah, once again, all text to video. So it was a lot of time spent up front defining like who your character is, so you can get consistent character looks, what the location is. Like the thesis was, if Guy Ritchie made a horror movie type thing. Yeah, so
I had a touch of a Shaun of the Dead about it as
a
well.
little bit, yeah.
I'm sure that was in. Talking about that though, what's interesting, kind of, because as we chatted before this panel, and I kind of went down a rabbit hole on the internet as one does, looking at generative AI and those steps through prompt to execution to kind of final frame as well. It's so rapid. You said yourself, you did that in a weekend. One of the things I was kind of sort of casting my mind back to was sitting in a writer's room and going through the iteration process and that discipline of iteration, right? And going, oh, hang on a sec, stop, pause, wait, is this right? Is that wrong? And stuff like that. How do you keep that while you're moving at such speed and you're able to do it at such speed? That temptation to go at speed versus the stop and the hold moments.
I usually spend 90% going really fast and then 10% just like overthinking every single choice that I made.
I think that's a general truth of the industry. Is like you spend 90% of your time on the last 10%.
It's so fun because you could see these crazy ideas you have in your head extremely fast.
Yeah, and I think just looking at it from like a studio perspective, when you're working on like a feature, the amount of time it takes to go from, let's say, a script to actually having something that you can look at in storyboard version, or from a storyboard version of one sequence to actually seeing a first pass of animation is really, might be a couple of months before you see that. And so to be able to get that visualization in, as you said, in a weekend, and then start making those iterative changes, because really all of the work that makes something from being very mediocre to something amazing is all of the refinement and the director giving feedback. And so if we can actually get to that point faster and then be able to iterate quicker, that's just going to allow the filmmakers to be able to, to have something at the end that you have that much more iteration on, and you're not spending so much time waiting for those intermediate steps.
Yeah, you get to your iterations so much faster. I think one of the, in feature films, one of the most horrifying things you could hear in sort of the last stretch is animation change come out of editorial. It's like the scary.
We need another head on the
Although that being said, I think that is right now one of the things that's the hardest with these models, is that making changes in kind of giving those director changes. Like if we're trying this out right now, and if our director is saying, hey, can you just add another 10 frames where you hold that pose so that you actually see it, because that's really what registers. You're basically going back to square one with putting, trying to,
so that
how do you
hasn't
do
changed.
that? And so in some sense, some of those things are actually very easy for an animator to do based on the way that we've constructed the whole animation process. And so that's really, I think, the work that is going to happen over the next several years is how do you actually have something that is really, we always called it art directed from a visual standpoint, but how do you have something that really is directed where you're not, like right now we have to go and regenerate a bunch of videos and hope that one of them, and so the types of things that are hard change.
Okay.
I think that's a really, sorry. I mean, it's just such an important point because we see a lot of materials coming out, and I think the larger the scale of the project, the more important Larry's point is, because you're working with the collaboration of a lot of people at different departments, different times in the process, and we need to get to art director people or to a place where you can sort of creatively direct that and hand that off to other people to be able to control it. And getting away from that mindset that it's a person who's prompting their way into finishing a movie, to realizing that we have a whole lot of work to do to make this work for a collaborative process of filmmakers.
Well, you mentioned that earlier, talking
That was a
about
little word salad.
That was good. That was good. But you spoke about this earlier before the panel. Spoke about the communication process and how that drastically does it exist at all, or does it just need an adjustment from a traditional model? Using the word model again.
I mean, we are. Our studio right now has about 17 projects going through it right now in various stages. 17 at the same time. I think we're occupying probably all the greatest AI artists right now, all in one thing. Music videos, all this. And the really interesting thing about it is just that the tools were not built for multi-user collaborative environments. So what we have to do, it's really difficult. And that's like we're in the pre-production on an animated feature right now. And just the pipeline and the workflow to get everybody making anything is hard. And then on top of that, to the point about changes, I mean, that's one problem we're trying to solve right now too, is the waterfall effect. If I go back and change somebody's clothes, you could do that in CG, not easy, but easier. AI, you're kind of like going back.
What was already there, as opposed to you pulled the handle out. Right?
Yeah, it's so there's a massive problem in terms of like collaboration and everything.
Right.
Oh, yeah, no, I was just going to say, one of the things that is different, though, is that, like, we're creating, fully generated AI shorts that are animated, and so what happens is that there's just fewer people, like, the communication actually can go between fewer people, because
Interesting.
So it's really, though, the communication with like, you're relying on these AI video models or image models to actually make these changes. And so you need people who are much more fluid between a bunch of different techniques, because it also requires, like, at a certain point, you're like, you know what, I could do this in editorial much faster, or I can go into Photoshop and change this one thing and then propagate it a different way. And so I think right now there's because the tools don't really allow for that in the same way, then you need people who are creative problem solvers, which is kind of like, when we were doing CG 20 years ago, it was the same thing where
Technical artists.
Yeah, like where you have like these generalists who can, who there's not really a prescribed, like, this is the process that we're going to go through, so each thing is new and you have to, like, figure it out.
You need
and so we're kind of in those early phases of that, and
you need problem
built your
solvers.
studio.
Oh,
now,
yeah, I mean,
great.
it's super, I mean, it's funny that you say that, because a lot of what we're working with a major studio right now on bringing to likenesses that we all know, to, all done in AI. And it's like one of these things, it's like you kind of go down this pipeline of like, okay, well, this didn't work, let's try this.
Yeah.
This didn't work, let's try this. It's more or less a slot machine on this, So it is, sometimes I do kick myself and go, God, this would be so much easier if I just shot it. But
if I just grabbed a camera and went out in the street, why didn't I?
I mean, everybody thinks AI is just pushing a button. It is not. So.
Well, I think that's what everybody wants, is the big red button that push this movie comes out. Hey, we got a franchise on our hands, but that's just far from the reality.
I don't think artists and filmmakers want that either, right?
I don't think artists and filmmakers want it. There might be some other people that want it.
But and maybe that's possible, but how good will it be? We don't know. That's why I think it's interesting to think about it as a collaborator, right? Because you're not. Look. Movies have always had a relationship with technology, right? Like from the very beginning, it was the motion pictures, arts and sciences, right? There's a science piece, and for the length of time I've been involved, it's always been a relationship with computers. I came into this industry as a digital artist and compositor on computers, and so, but I was around optical compositors and traditional matte painters at the time who were dealing with that transition. I think of the way I kind of think about this in terms of the roles and the communication
Right.
and kind of how we're going to have to support what is effectively a new pipeline is like we spent 30 years taking what used to be shot on film and breaking it up into the most tiny minutia of pieces to be able to craft it so delicately frame by frame. And we're now pulling pieces of it back together. Right? So we're trying to make it mostly in 2D again and in different ways. And so the roles and how we go about managing it it's just effectively going to completely change. But you know, the mechanics of telling good stories shouldn't.
So let's actually, we're gonna take a little walk down memory lane, kids. No, we're gonna go to a conversation, Larry, that you and I had, your days at Pixar, which has just been rattling around my head for the last few days. And we spoke about your time there during as they sort of worked from traditional animation, the drawn line, and then moving that into things like Toy Story, Monsters, Inc., where you're using 3D computer-created graphic characters, and then how you actually animated that, which kind of blew my mind. Because you told me that if you wanted, Sully or Mike Wachowski from Monsters, Inc. to smile, you went into a spreadsheet and you adjusted numbers up or down, which made the smile. And that kind of blew my mind, that's the way that it was done.
Blew my mind, too, when I got to Pixar, to be honest. So, I mean, my background's on the technical side. And so I was, blown away by what they had done on Toy Story, and I started working at Pixar right after Toy Story came out. And so what I naively, I didn't really appreciate the artistry involved. I was like, oh, there's all these programmers who are like doing all this, like making
so much fun,
making this great film. And
Yeah,
then when I got there, first of all, what was there was a whole bunch of artists who were completely traditional artists, all went to, like top art schools, a lot of Cal Arts grads, and then a bunch of super brilliant engineers who most of them all wanted to create films but didn't understand anything necessarily about the artistic process, and we all met in the middle. But what was also surprising is that you had all of these traditionally trained animators who were amazing drawers and like visual storytellers. And then they had to get into our computer program, which was state of the art and won all these, Sci-Tech awards and everything. But literally was like, like typing in numbers in a spreadsheet to make a character smile. And so like, if you think about the amazing feat that Toy Story was, it was even more amazing when you consider that they were basically shoehorning themselves into tools that were not the same, like the input was not visual. Like you want to sit there and being drawing, like that smile and extending it. And, you might get a draw over and then, we would go in and like try to program stuff and do whatever it took. And so I think, like I then, was involved in computer animated filmmaking and movies for the next, 20 years. And so that process changed to where if you go to Pixar or DreamWorks today, it's very artistic. And so you're really directly manipulating the 3D puppet or rig. That's the area that I focused in on. And you're able to do draw overs and have, like using a Cintiq draw the character and then having the rig reflect that. And
we're
so it's
about
much
that drawn line, line to spreadsheet, and then you were there for bringing it from the spreadsheet down to the graphics tablet.
So hopefully the artists aren't having to go through these like incredible hoops to actually get their vision
you got them back
on
to
the
pen.
screen.
Yeah.
And so like the ability to get back to the pen, is really, really important.
Amazing.
And we like at DreamWorks, we worked on this animation system Primo, which was basically a redoing of our really crappy animation system. And one of the things though that we did do is that we specifically said we're not going to have a spreadsheet.
No more spreadsheets.
And so all of the old school animators were like, what? You can't not have a spreadsheet. Like, what are you talking about?
That's how I create is Excel.
And so that was actually a really, like, we just unilaterally made that decision. And that was the best decision because it didn't have this back door of, oh, I can always go and like do things the way that like that they were brought up working on stuff.
Well, God bless you. No more spreadsheets. You hear that, boss? No more spreadsheets, okay?
I love
Nobody likes
spreadsheets
them.
in other domains, but not in
No,
not
don't
for
ruin it
making
for me,
animation.
Larry. Don't ruin it for
I
me.
have no doubt that spreadsheets are exactly how people are managing their iterations of generative videos right now.
We're back
Hopefully
to the
not.
spreadsheet again. Absolutely fantastic. Talking actually then with that, Jason, I want to chat because we spoke a lot about prompts, right? And we spoke about traditionally when you director working with an actor, and you would say, "Hey, actor, walk over here," and "Hey, put your hand up like this," and you get the scene out of them, right? Directing the action, and we were looking at those parables between that and the prompts and creating the prompts, and I guess I'm kind of curious as to where it goes. We feel like we're in the spreadsheet bit with the prompts right now, and then we get back to the graphics tablet again. We get back to the pen in hand. Do you see that possible for where we're heading?
Yeah, I mean, it's naturally where it's. I mean, I think we're kind of behind the curtain right now. You know,
Right.
like kind of in the spreadsheet.
The wizards
you know,
back there, yeah.
and as we start to as this, I mean, we all have to. You know, I don't know what everybody's background in this room is, but like AI is it's very new. I mean, I still feel like we're at year zero. Like we
Right.
haven't really moved into what it could do yet. But like just seeing the films just project
Yeah.
on the screen, and I was like, okay,
Beautiful.
well, it actually does project well, and it's in 4K. But there is, you know, we are at this extreme infancy where you know prompts are right now how we create things, but you know, hopefully down the line, it's I define a character, I define a location, and now it comes very visual. And I think that's the future we're trying to move towards is to take that the prompt. Although I'm twisted, I'm fucked up. I love to text prompt. Like that is my thing. I could
pretty
do
messed
these
up.
extremely long text prompts of what's in my head, and that's not for everybody. You know, like that is like a very like I've seen so many artists just fail at that. They just can't
Right.
do it because you have to be so descriptive. You have to be so like methodical in how you do that. I actually use a GPT to help me as
I
well.
was gonna
But
say that's what's funny
Yeah.
is that we used ChatGPT to help.
Yes.
Take your text prompt and create a better text
yes,
prompt.
make a more structured text prompt. Yes.
I'm not joking, by the way.
hang on a second.
That works very
recommend
well.
it. They
You're
recommend
using
it.
you're using AI to help you use AI.
I built
Because-
I built my own GPT that does that.
Yeah, I think everyone is. It understands how to
Right.
caption better for the
I
other
see.
model.
Okay,
It
right.
cleanly structures the messiness of my brain.
I see. To that point, then, with obviously what we saw there with the fiance with Unhoused, Barbara, you said to me talking about AI in the final frames. When we chatted on the phone, where is? Oh, sorry. Oh, we're back. Okay, sorry. We're talking about AI and when it meets the final frames, essentially what goes out in the master. Where do you draw that line?
Quality.
It's just a quality
Yeah,
game.
it's whether it can. So I think, and maybe I'm a little different on this panel because I work with a lot of long form live action, and
Right.
where the continuity of it matters, the quality of it matters. But where I see the most value is I think very similar to everyone else up here, is that it gets you to what you're looking for, as close to it as possible, more quickly. You know,
So would you say its best use for you is kind of more in a previs sort of sense, or you don't want to limit it to that?
no, I wouldn't limit any. I
No.
mean, just looking at what a difference a year makes between the two. I think you have to try it out. So there are
Right.
things rather than thinking about will it make, and I know people are doing it, will it make a compelling feature cinematic film beginning to end? I don't know, but I know that there are places that it does provide real value. In a
Right.
finished context, like I could imagine in series or in reenactments or in news, there's probably a lot of places where the fidelity of it is less of an issue than,
Right.
say, a tent pole, right? You can use it in those cases. But what I was going to get is
Yeah.
this gets back to the way you were describing the handful of people in editorial or the story artist who's kind of, I need it to look like this. Those efforts, that translation of communication from what the director, editorial, or an animation director would say and getting it executed could take a really long time, whereas you can probably get, maybe it's not final pixel, but you can get
Right.
to approximation of what people are talking about and get to a place where people can make decisions about
Everybody on
things,
the same page.
which is incredibly valuable,
Right.
without it, ever being the final pixel.
It's in it.
I was just going to say that we have a saying that pre-production is the new post-production. You really can see a final frame of something very, very quickly. And yeah, to get people on the same page, to communicate your vision, everything, like whatever it is, you could see it in extreme detail very, very, very quickly, which is like, as a creative, one of the most magical things. You're seeing what it's going to look like right away.
Right. I compare it very much to, honestly, the work that we do in hardware with 3D printing. Are we going to necessarily finish in 3D printing? Maybe sometimes, maybe not, but it gets us to kind of the physical hardware in hand a lot quicker and allows us to make decisions, very sort of usability-based decisions much, much earlier in the process.
And I got to tell you, on visual effects movies, that's an enormous financial impact, that potential, right? Like, and Kevin Fields somewhere here. I worked with, I had large PhD heavy R&D teams working on simulation software, facial software that we would spend a year on for a specific project, it's millions of dollars, and then change direction. Or it's out of picture, and so things that via like natural phenomena elements, for example, it may not be final pixel, but the idea that you can prompt your way into an explosion or a fire or some sort of event, destruction event, and see something, get a directorial sense of what it's going to look like to give to your VFX team versus waiting through the months and months of development to see something back is a huge impact, and maybe the difference between a project getting greenlit or not.
That in my mind, the way that you describe it, it helps. It's almost as if it actually helps keep the project grounded in many ways. If I think about from my very, very uneducated seat here, I think about kind of working with AI. I think about, we spoke about the rapid nature of creation and how that might even feel a little unhinged and a little out of control. But the way that you're describing it in a sense of a collaboration tool seems much more like it's actually that's the very thing that helps keep the sentiment, the story, the character grounded throughout that process. But to your point of what you said earlier, it's that communication between the individuals and artists.
I feel like something that the picture that won the Academy Award for Best Animated last year, Flow. Small team of people. I feel like that's going to be our future. We're instead of these massive teams that take, and that doesn't mean. I think a lot of people, I always have to say this because people go, oh my God, I'm not gonna have a job, but I don't think that's the case. I think we're gonna see a renaissance in indie filmmaking. There are gonna be more productions, but with fewer people. Yeah. That's my prediction.
More productions.
I agree with that completely. And the roles are slightly different.
Totally, different roles, but like what we have realized is that people that come from a traditional background and have started using AI, we much prefer working with them than people that don't, because they understand filmmaking, they understand how to tell stories, they understand how to move a camera, how to light things, how to do all those things. Those roles are still totally relevant in AI.
Right.
Yeah. And that's, I think, the thing that in going to CG that we found as well, which is that the fundamentals of storytelling, the fundamentals of acting, the fundamentals of animation, those are all completely valid. It's just you're using a different tool set to try to get you there, and one that has different strengths and weaknesses, and obviously that is going to change over time.
Right. So I touched on earlier that discipline of iteration. That's coming from your experience, from all three of you, your experience in the industry and of telling stories, of going through a creative process. What if I don't have that experience and I am just picking up these things for the first time and wielding them?
I was going to say, I think that's one of the amazing things right now, is that anyone can actually use these tools.
Right. They're for everybody.
And be able to create something and to learn right now. Like you actually don't need to be at a company, you don't need permission. And so the opportunities to be able to create, to go and create a film are never been lower than they are right now. Like you don't need fancy equipment.
Insanely low. But I'm curious, how many people here have used Sora 2 and downloaded that? Anybody? Sora 2?
Got here one, 2, 3, 4, maybe.
That,
8 or 10, maybe.
I'll describe it for anybody who hasn't, but it's it's an app, and you could just type anything in, and you get a 8-second video out. And it launched a little less than a week ago.
Yeah.
I became obsessed with it only because of the fact that I feel like, to your point, it is like the bar is so low now. Like you literally just need an app on your phone, and you could prompt something that I feel is pretty incredible sometimes. Like I got a whole commercial out of it, for 8-second commercial for, the craziest things. And, it has this ability now that, and I think it's just going to get easier and easier for a lot of people, that you can just jump in at any point from your phone.
Is it creativity without limitation? Truly?
I mean,
Well, there are limitations, but it is creativity.
So-
I didn't think that was going to be as
prompting, yeah.
controversial as it was.
But I think one of the things that's really interesting about Sora 2 is that in this context is that it's not all of the other videos are video models are creating one video. Sorry, all of the other video models are creating one video for you, and then if you want to create like a 30 or 10-second. You're basically editing those together, whereas Sora 2 is creating a series of videos that together makes this 8-second clip, and so that in and of itself is really allowing
Oh, and I just learned this morning that you could actually say from 0 seconds to 2 seconds, I want this shot, and then this.
And you could be
so
as prescriptive
you
as
could be
want,
extremely prescriptive. I mean, it's
like
pretty
keyframing.
magical.
yeah.
and scary.
Yeah.
because it's because the quality. But I think I think we're at that point where AI, for the most part, in a lot of the filmmaker communities, has been kind of not really accepted by a lot of people. It's I think slowly but surely it is now. But like this is, and then the consumer audience did not like it when we put out the Coca-Cola spot last year. So I think we are at this interesting inflection point where, because it is easy, and now like my mom could go on there and prompt a video in Sora and put me in it.
Is your mom on Sora?
I gave her an invite code.
You're gonna get her an invite code.
She's gonna put me in videos, I'm sure.
I see. I'm gonna be just the old man yelling at the cloud for a second now. I think back to film school. When I think back to film school, it was a lot of what we were taught with restriction. Sort of create this, write this, but you're not allowed to use sound. You're not allowed, or you must do this. It must be of this length. It must be of that. I think I'm looking at some of these tools now, and I say that sort of creativity without limitation. Getting rid of the restriction, is it going to potentially kind of just make us less creative? Is boundary what makes us creative?
Well, what's interesting now is I feel like the tools that exist now actually have more limitations than than we did.
Technical.
Yes, I think they will go away. But for example, if you want to create something with multiple characters in it, very hard to do. Stuff with extreme action, very hard to do with video models. So like right now, I do think you actually if anything, you have to work within certain limitations of what these video models are capable of, but those limitations are changing at a much faster rate and improving at a much faster rate than they ever have.
And we spoke about aesthetic character consistency, Jason. That's a particular challenge at the moment within the models.
It's gotten a lot better in the past 2 weeks.
2 weeks. I love
that's
that.
The sad part of it.
It's true.
It's gotten better in the last hour, guys. So really,
actually,
it's not.
What was it, Tuesday? Whatever it released.
I was gonna say,
and it just got better again.
Literally, there's probably a new app dropping now, and it's better.
And it's better now.
No, when we did the Coca-Cola spot last year, a new video model came out 5 days before the spot. We were supposed to turn in the spot, and our team stayed up all night long, and they reran every single shot again because it was better.
Okay. Yes, Barbara.
I do think we're going to see a massive volume of
Absolutely
generated content of all kinds.
It's called slop.
Yeah.
I'm going to be
Right.
very polite
content.
about it, which will remind. So I studied fine art, and I don't know how I ended up in this in photography. And I remember when everyone had got a phone, the iPhone with the camera, and suddenly everybody was a photographer, and like a massive amount of photography that was out there. And I think I see similar things. But one of my favorite things that I always go back to, because I feel like too much can be too much.
Too much is too much.
You know,
Yeah.
I had to, as painters, we had to spend our first year with 5 colors on a palette. That's all we were allowed to paint. Like any painting
Right.
we did, regardless of the topic,
That was
was
your
the same
restriction.
restriction.
Right.
And I think some of the most beautiful stories that are told are told based on constraint. Shrek was one of those. Like had,
Right.
you know, come out of constrained situations. And so when I think about getting back to your question about should everyone do this, and I have a mentee who is a USC Cinematic Arts graduate, and who's been working on the ECC project, and all of his peers are freaking out about what they should be learning, what they should be focusing on, and you know, they could lose. It's sort of a Robin Hood moment for them. It's like, should we be getting subscriptions to all these different models, all these different tools? Because I think if you're any of us, you're not really thinking about the cost of it. I'm sure you are to some
Right.
extent, but not like a student coming out of school. They're not free, right?
No.
Yes, that's
Right. And so, you know, I try to remind them, like, know what you're trying to make. Run into the problem you're trying to solve and making it, and then look for the right tools to use to do that. And they're always going to be moving
Right.
forward, so check back on them. But don't start with the tool. Start
No.
with what you're trying to create.
That's fantastic advice. I'm going to get that tattooed. It's going to take up most of my back. Said
attribution.
Barbara. No, to that point, then let's talk about the sort of. I want to think about what guidance you have for filmmakers who are starting out with this sort of seemingly very immense brand new toolkit. And you said for some of it there is a financial barrier to it. It doesn't. You know, a lot of these models aren't free, but for some of them they are free.
Well, it's a lot cheaper than going out and getting a crew and doing something.
Yes.
Put it that way. So
I don't know. I bribed a lot of people with a slice of
I
pizza.
know.
in
I
my
made
time,
I
so-
made music videos, so I'm very low
I
budget,
know,
but
right?
it is cheaper than
I
that.
turn to the tools.
Always turn to the pizza; it gets more done. But what guidance and advice do you have? That was, I mean, fantastic words. They're saying, you know, put the tools last. Start with what you're trying to tell, and then get to the tool after that. But there are some people to the point we were talking about. We never did the drawn line. We were never there for that. I was never there for that. I think I touched 16 mil once. But there's going to be some sort of younger filmmakers coming into the industry who will have never touched Premiere or Final Cut or Media Composer or any of these, or After Effects. They're going to go straight into this cold. And it is limit us off.
Yeah, I mean,
So what advice do you got?
I always tell, no matter who I'm working with, like, it's all story first. You know,
Right.
Start with story. You have the tools, can do anything, but start with story. Everything always should come back to that. But I've always just encouraged. I mean, we had an intern that was at Loyola Marymount, and he was going to school as a cinematographer, and he did one AI short, and I saw it, and I just thought it was great. But I looked at his traditional work, and that was great as well.
Right.
Brought him in, mentored him. We just hired him. He's incredible, and I was like, are you sure you don't want to go and shoot stuff in real life?
Yeah.
And he's like, no, I want to do this. And it was really interesting because he the way that he ran into it, like, with his eyes wide open, was
Yeah.
incredible. And I think so that's really my advice for most people is, like, just do it. You know,
Just try.
like, so many people
Yeah.
talk about it or think about it or like ask about it, but just do it. Just run into it, you know, eyes wide open and make it, you know, just start with a story too.
Right.
Yes, I do agree. Story is the most important thing. But, you know, to parallel that, I mean, if you think there's so many professions where you actually, you know, like if you're going to be a surgeon, you can't just go and do that. You have to go through schooling.
Yeah, there is
and,
quite a bit of training,
You know,
actually.
yeah, there's a lot of training. But filmmaking, yeah, exactly. I tried. But filmmaking is one of those things that you don't need permission. You can, and the people who have stories to tell, now is an amazing time to be able to do that really cheaply, really, you know, like experimentally, and so it's the same advice we give to anyone, you know, because we get a lot of people asking us that on the animation side, and it's like, now, you know, all of these tools are roughly for free. You know, a lot of the animation tools are for free now. The video models, if you're smart, they're, you know, like you could do them where they're not racking up thousands of dollars in fees, and it's still going to be cheaper than what you would do if you're shooting something. But this has never been, there's never been a greater time to be able to go and tell the stories that you want. And it's all about, as you said, like what if I'm not like a seasoned director? Well, the only way you could become a seasoned director is by directing stuff. And that's something you can do without having to go work at a big studio. You can do that without having to spend a lot of money. And so, the sooner you start making your, putting in your 10,000 hours to that, the sooner you will get to the point where you have that intuition and, you are a seasoned director.
Yeah.
I mean, they both sort of, I think you said it explicitly and you're alluding to it. The barrier to entry is like non-existent now to get started. And that's that's the most exciting part.
Does it need guidance? I kind of talking. I think from the cheap seats, right? So I look on the internet and we go AI, and we see a lot of cats in the gym roided out, and that's it's an interesting use of AI. Don't get me wrong, but then I talk with the three of you, and it's a very different story. It seems almost like a completely different story. Does it need more guidance for young filmmakers to really, again, how to wield this tool, help them, not restrict them, not limit them, but just guide them?
One of my first Sora 2 videos was a cat and a dog.
Yeah, not helping my point.
Fist fighting each other, standing up, fist fighting each other, caught on a body cam police camera. I'm very proud of that.
It won an Oscar, I think. I think it won an Oscar. Yeah.
I mean, you could dream anything up. You could do anything.
There's nothing wrong with that. I mean, I used it to make sheep cross MacArthur Park in Los Angeles, right?
That didn't happen for real?
But
Wait, what?
It's practice, right? It's like the Carnegie Hall, practice. It doesn't matter if it's a cat, because I think if you're exploring, it may lead to something else.
Right. There are also for each of these tools, there are Reddit groups, and there are people who have actually who are like the passionate ones with this specific tool, and so is another way to actually, for specific models, to find out how people are actually using them and trying to get the most out of them, because a lot of them are idiosyncratic in certain ways.
Sorry. I was just going to say also Discord. Most of these models actually have channels broken out by style, by different things that people are creating too. And you can learn so much about prompting.
What a rabbit hole that is. Oh my goodness.
I use I won't call it X, but Twitter and LinkedIn. I just fill up a lot of people that I follow are just interesting people in the space. Yeah. So you just naturally pick up and learn from just seeing more stuff and learning how they did it.
Right. I mean, you three, you may not know it, maybe you do, but just in talking about it, just in going through the exercise, you are teachers. It's exactly what you are, and you talk about Reddit. That in itself is a small teacher, just people collaborating and again communicating with each other. It's what teaches us. We talk about YouTube University a lot. I for one am a graduate, and it's so I think the guidance maybe to put the guidance back in human form, if you will, maybe we just need to actually stop fearing this and actually lean in a little bit and go, hey, let's watch this together, shall we, children?
It's not going away.
It's not going away. I'm going to say something maybe a little bit controversial, just because I just thought of it and I have to say it out. I think we've gotten really precious about what cinematic experience is too over time, right? Like, VistaVision films and completely shot in IMAX films, it was a way of differentiating from all this other stuff happening. But I was thinking about Shrek, actually, and how it was YouTube quality. I don't know if people realize it. You go back and look at Shrek 1, it was a .r, this like proprietary format,
like 480p.
Which was like YUV 8-bit. And that's the truth. And we made a movie out of it, and it did okay. It's inducted into the Library of Congress as a national treasure.
Good work.
But it just goes to show, like, the experience and the story and the characters, the things that really matter should still matter.
Right. That's fascinating stuff. So, I'm gonna leave us on a little quote that's been rattling around in my head, guys. Is Claude Debussy, the French 19th century composer, and he said this. He said, "Art is the most beautiful deception of all, and although people try to incorporate the events of everyday life in it, we must hope that it will remain a deception, lest it become a utilitarian thing, sad as a factory. Now, I didn't know what this meant. My mother told me this a while ago. So what did I do? I went to Google AI, and I asked it, and I said, and I was
Gemini.
like, exactly, yeah, right. And I asked it, and I was like, what does this mean? I was like, what is this actually trying to say? And it gave me an answer, and it was very legible, and it actually even gave me the reference of where it came from. Almost most important is where it's actually learning this information. But it was fascinating because AI didn't teach me that. My mother taught me that, but AI did help me remember what I'd been taught. And so I do think about that. And as we look up from our keyboards, and I kind of just wonder, am I a teacher, or when should I be a teacher next? On that note, I will thank all of our panelists. Barbara, Larry, Jason, thank you so much. Appreciate your time.
Thank you,
Absolutely fantastic. Thank you, everybody. Enjoy the Mill Valley Film Festival. Please do have a look at Iodine, and please do look at Perception Grid, and enjoy the rest of your week, guys. Take care.